Hi guys, it's Allie. Welcome to Power Poppy. Today for Inspire Me Monday, we're going to make a faux stained glass window card. So come and join me. I began by making my card base. So this is a piece of 110-pound weight cardstock, and it is a trifold card. And the beauty of this is that if you use your Score Buddy, there's this little arrow. So if you take your sheet of 11-inch paper, mine is 5.5 by 11 long, and you basically, you're going to run it once, flip it around 180 and do it twice. You've got a perfectly dimensioned trifold card. Then I actually took a gorgeous die by Catherine Pooler Designs, and this is a 2-part die, and I took the inner part and die cut this window space out of the front panel of my card. So I also needed a frame, so I took the same die with its outer piece and I cut a separate piece of paper and I created a die for the outside of the window. This is going to help hide all the edges of my clear acetate that I'm going to put over the top. So makes for a really easy window card when you've got the window and the frame all built into one. So let's go and get our stamping done. So for this part, you're going to need a stamp positioner, some Versamark ink, some of your favorite no line coloring ink. I'm going to use some ink on 3, your embossing powder of choice. I'm going to use some detail copper today, and your card base and some clear acetate. So the idea is that you're going to see the same image on the acetate and also the same image on the inner page below. And so you need to stamp it basically in the same position. So let's stamp it, our inner part first. Okay, I have got my piece of cardstock put in. Make sure you get the right side of your page. You don't want to put it on the inside. My cutout frame is on the far right and my inner side is on the left. I have positioned my stamp where I want it, and I've also put a piece of masking tape here. This is the low tack stuff, and because I don't want my image to go onto the, because this is the back of the card, don't want my image on the back. Just want it on that one single panel. All right, so I'm going to pick up my image. This is the amazingly gorgeous Poppy XL stamp. It also comes with coordinating dies. I'm going to use my fade out ink. I'm going to ink it up nice and heavily. The beauty of the stamp positioner is that if you don't get enough ink in one spot, is that you can just open it up, re-ink it, and press it down again. So, not quite dark enough, but close. So again, apply more ink, close the lid. I do like to give it a little bit of pressure. Perfect. Okay, so we've got our image here. We're going to set this one aside. And I've left my stamp in the exact same spot. And we're going to use my piece of acetate. Now I've cut this a little bit larger than what I need, and I've also cut it the height of my card. You can fiddle around with what you need. I am going to play it safe, and I'm going to put a little bit of anti-static powder across my acetate. It's going to help get rid of those strays. We're going to go in with Versamark this time. And once again, some good presses. Now you could also do this with a StazOn ink. It will actually stay on a piece of acetate. It will actually ink up a piece of acetate and stay there. You'll have to be very careful about Actually, that's pretty good. You'll have to be very, very careful about positioning, so your stamp position will come in handy again. So I know you really can't see it. Oh, there you go. But through the powder, there's my inked image, and I'm going to apply my copper detail powder and heat set it. I'm going to make sure that my heat tool is nice and warm, because this is not heat safe acetate. There are heat proof acetates on the market. I don't happen to have them, so I know this does work. You just have to be really, really careful and make sure your tool is nice and hot. I'll be right back. So I finished coloring my bloom. I used some Polychromos pencils to do the center and to do some of the more detailed fine line shadow work. And now I'm going to go and make a mask, because I want to color the outside of the bloom and I want to add some stuff to the inside of the bloom without putting it on the outside. So I stamped my image fully out on a scrap piece of paper, and I put some Express It masking film over top. It's basically a clear repositionable tape, more or less, and I buy it in big sheets. So I just put it across because I want it bigger than my card. And now I'm going to cut out the bloom, and I'm going to have two pieces. So I'm going to have a round and I'm going to have the bloom. So I'll go and cut them out and we'll get started. Okay, so I just put it on a scrap piece of paper. I'm going to bring in another scrap piece of paper here and put my piece of repositionable tape right down along that seam once again. And it's basically both masking and holding on that piece of paper, just so I don't have any spray that goes on the back of the card. So I've cut out my film, my masking film here, and this stuff is repositionable. So you can actually, you know, tack it to the plastic cover on your stamp set and reuse it over and over again. Super easy to cut out like such, and then you carefully find something that's fairly detailed and it wants to stick on its own here, and line everything up. Press down your film, and away you go. That looks pretty good. I'm okay with things being a little off because we can fix that. Okay, so the mask is now over top of all of the coloring, and we're going to go and get the Copic airbrush system ready to rock and roll. Alright, so I have put my V12 into my air grip. It's ready to go. Just have to match up the same angle as the air distributor with the same angle as the chisel tip, and we're going to apply our color right around the whole entire piece. So we're covering everything that's not masked. So I've got a pretty good base coat. Now I'm going to try and deepen right around the bloom and have it darker around the bloom. I know this is weird, but that's kind of what I had in my head when I was thinking about this card. So I'm going to add some more V12, concentrating around the bloom, and then I may actually pull in another darker purple. So let's continue. I'm going to pull in a darker shade. I'm going to pull in a V15. I always test my markers off to the side on a scrap piece of paper. Every marker is different and every marker sprays differently, so be aware of that. The darker the marker, the more bigger splats you get. If you look very carefully, I have some larger splats and I'm okay with that. Like I said, the darker the color, the more bigger splats, just due to the pigment size. I'm going to pull in a stencil here, so let me go and find that stencil and I'll be right back. Unfortunately, I lost the actual video footage of this aspect, so I just want to insert this, and this is how I did my stenciling. This is the Twisted Sunburst stencil from Catherine Pula Designs, and I basically, with my mask still down over my flower and masking off the back page, I tacked this down with some low tack tape, and then I used my V12 and my airbrush system, and I just concentrated around putting my ink around the edge of the flower to make it darker around the edge of the flower. Then I took a little bit of the V15 and did the same thing, so it's actually a little bit, it's more of a gradient. And then actually what I did is I flipped my stencil over for just a tiny little bit and did the same thing. Now it's really, really hard to see, but it did create a different curvature to the back. And then with my mask still on, then I did some different airbrushing. And I'm going to show you an example of that. So I wanted some larger splatter on the background. So instead of putting my Copic airbrush system together like it should, this is the chisel end and it's normally put into the system like that. I took it and I put it in backwards. So now my brush tip is put into the system. And it actually gives a very different effect. It gives you a very large spatter in comparison to the nib end. So it gives you a larger splatter pattern. It's not as smooth. So this is how I added some really kind of spotty dotties in the background. Before I take off my mask, because my mask is still over my bloom, I'm going to show you another trick with the Copic airbrush system. I'm going to pull in a really dark, this is a BV08, and if you put your markers in backwards, yes, backwards, you get a different spray pattern. It's a lot more chunky and spitty. So if you look at the spray right there, see how it's much more granular and not so smooth. So I like putting that on sometimes on the backs of my cards because I like that spotty dotty texture. So we're going to do that to the background before I go and remove that mask. So I'll get you in a little closer here. Once again, my mask is still there. I'm just putting some splatter onto the background. This is a very, very dark color, so you get some really cool splatters because the pigment is just it's a little bit larger, so it gives you these funky splatters. I like it. Okay, let's do the magical thing now, and let's pull off our mask. Now, my mask I know is not sitting completely correctly on my flower. I can already tell that there's some white spots. Now, I can either fix it with blue Copic, or I can leave it as part of the design as having like white highlights on the edge of those petals, and I may actually just leave it as an accent. There we go. Let's pull off our other side. Once again, you can reuse that mask, so save it and put it in with your stamp set. Okay, so we're making progress here. Now I want to put on the other mask. Okay, so this time we're going to mask off the background so we don't add anything to the background. We're going to pull in some white acrylic paint, and I'll get set up and I'll be right with you. Okay, so I have a little bit of white acrylic paint in my palette here. I'm going to put like 1 drop-ish, 2 drops of water. That's all you need. I really want it to remain as opaque as possible. So just adding a touch of water just to make it slightly more runny. That's all it needs. It doesn't need a lot of water. The less water, the more opaque it is. Okay. I want a galaxy feel again to this. So I've got a tiny little paintbrush here, and I'm going to literally tap it against my finger. The tinier the brush, the tinier the spatters. So basically this is make white splatters until you're happy. I've decided not to mask off my background, so right now I have no mask other than just masking off the back of my card. So I'm going to put a fair amount. With having a colored background with that Copic airbrushing, the white will show up a lot better, obviously. Okay. You can also turn your card around. Splatters show a directional pattern. If you like a more random pattern to your splatters, then turn your card around every so often. Now you can also take a white gel pen and add some larger fake splatters by using your white gel pen. I'd like a few more, just slightly larger, so I may end up taking my gel pen in and making some fake splatter. Trying to concentrate a little bit more splatter on the petals, but I'm okay with it going outside, obviously. Some nice ones up there. Like I said, the smaller the brush, the smaller the splatter. I like smaller splatter. I don't like big droplets. I think it takes away from the card. Now, the other thing you could do as well to play with your background is to take your brush and dip it into some blender solution and make droplets of blender solution. But know that you could really have some funky things happen to your bloom. So you may want to mask off your bloom if you were to do that. And it would play with the Copic ink in the background. Like I said, I want this to look starry. Okay. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to be very, very careful not to, I hope, put my hand or arm into this at any point. I'd like to make a few more specifically star looking images kind of in the background here. So I'm just going to play, trying not to put my hand anywhere near the paint, because that acrylic paint, it needs a little bit of time to dry, obviously. So I think I'm going to put 3, and I'm going to vary the sizes. I'm not using too much paint. It's almost a dry brush technique. I'm just adding a little bit of starry detail. You could even stamp on some stars if you wanted to. We'll do another teeny tiny one here. Could also put in like a shooting star. Could also use your gel pen to do this as well. You don't have to use the acrylic paint. There we go. I got a big bloop there, but it's fine. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside, then we're going to work on the front. Okay, so we've got our background, it's masked, and I've got my Y15. I want to add a little bit of color to the front because we're going to put a white frame and our piece of acetate on the front, and I want just a touch of color so that my white frame stands out. So not as dark as my background that we did with the bloom, but just a little bit of color. I'm going to concentrate it sort of towards the inside of the window here. Okay, so let's test how much color we have and if it's out wide enough. Putting our frame in. That's perfect. It doesn't have to be like super duper dark. Maybe I'll run it a little bit more in the sides, and then we're ready to put the rest of the card together. So I have my frame. I've already put some double-sided adhesive on it. Now I have to locate my acetate. We do have to fold up our card because we need to, upside down, we need to make sure that our acetate matches up with the image we stamped. So we have to first of all drop our acetate on the image. I am going to take some just some low tack tape here and put it down, just to hold the acetate over top just for the moment. And I'm going to take off the backer pieces on our tape, apply the frame over top, and then I'm going to trim everything so that there's no pieces of acetate hanging out from behind that film. So just want to line up our die cut on the card, and then I can just trim it and we can go on with the next step. Okay, now that our acetate is all trimmed around our frame, I'm going to add some of the same adhesive again to the back of the frame, and then we're going to attach it to the card. So this card has a kind of a difficult closure. It's just because of the thickness. It doesn't crease really flat. So I'm going to make a belly band to put on this card. So I've used this Hugs die. I've created a gradient of blue using the lightest and the second lightest blues. I used my airbrush system, created that, and die cut out that. And then I also die cut out the two other aspects, one in black and then another one in some vellum. Then I cut some, this is kind of a bronze coppery metallic paper from Tim Holtz. I just cut a 3/4 inch band for this, and we're just going to temporarily tape this down just so it holds while I adhere everything together. So it's loosely folded around the card. It's not tight, otherwise you can't get it off and on. And I'm going to take off the backer paper, off the tape that I put on the back of the word hugs here. And we're just going to carefully put that on, make sure that both sides are tucked, and there we go. So this slips on and off. Your recipient can see the metallic embossing on the card there, and then when they open it, they have their stargazer floral image there with some stars, and then you can put a sentiment in the inside. Now, this is perfectly normal for Copics. If anybody knows that you're an artist, I tend to leave it like that. It's a homemade, handmade card, and if the recipient doesn't like it, well, too bad. So, thanks for joining me today. I hope I've inspired you to make something similar, and I hope you're joining me again. Bye, guys.